address any questions you have about predictive analytics. You can think of it as the free consulting segment of our webinar, open access to the modeling agency's advanced analytic gurus, senior consultants Scott Terry and Keith McCormick. Keith is on international travel. He had to depart a little bit early, but we're very pleased to have a special guest with us today, a great introduction and recommendation by Scott. I'd like to welcome Lillian Pearson to the Q&A panel. Lillian's a real up-and-comer in the advanced analytics training and consulting field. She's a LinkedIn Learning data science instructor. She's the author of Data Science for Dummies. She's a career coach for aspiring data science professionals, and she's really made a splash across social media within our area of practice. So we're thrilled to add Lillian's experience to the panel today. Welcome, Lillian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're glad to have you here, and we're glad that we're starting to get some really good questions. So let's go ahead and start with Ricky. Ricky asks, I just started as an analytics professional. I just finished a certification program, which was okay. As we saw in the poll, most companies are really in starting phases, yet they require analytics professionals with PhDs and advanced capabilities. How can one deal with this gap? And there's a follow-up question. Does your course cater to this situation? I'll go ahead and kick this off. And so, Ricky, you took a certification. Let me read the second part of this again, dealing with the gap. So there's a lot of PhD. I think what you're saying is there's a lot of what seems to be tactical experience or background, right? You've got these advanced data scientists, yet the organization is new. So I'll take now I get the nature of the question. I think it's that dichotomy, right? You've got a deep bench of technical muscle, but the organization is still fairly immature when it comes to progressing and becoming more, progressing through its digital transformation. So yeah, that's actually, I would say the poll really expresses the norm, and I think it's more of a chronic problem of the industry because of how a lot of organizations think about how they should solve analytics in general, and that is line up a deep bench of highly technical data scientists, and they're going to find these, and I put this in quotes, interesting insights, and hope that those insights align with organizational priorities. It just doesn't happen, and I think that's why so many organizations should be so much further ahead than where they are presently, because they're starting the book on Chapter 5. They're hiring, to put this in an anecdote that I often use, with the example of a car race. These organizations, in order to win, you have to understand the conditions of the road. You have to understand the rules of the race. You have to understand what it takes to win. And that really takes a skilled race car driver and a fantastic car, right? But at the same time, these organizations are over-hiring actually, auto mechanics. And they're toiling under the hood, and they're optimizing the engine, and they're making the car run faster, but they have no sense of the goals of the race, and again, what it takes to win. So they come up with these superior automobiles, no doubt, and they know their algorithms. They know machine learning. I don't see, many say there's a shortage of data scientists. I don't see it. Not those, if you run by the definition of those who are very well experienced in machine learning, statistics, coding, and the rest, I don't see a shortage in that. There's degree programs cranking them out all the time. But they're coming up with these automobiles, and they're running them off course, by 30 degrees, 45 degrees, at a very high rate of speed. So I can get, this is where I want a bumper sticker that says my linear regression will beat up your deep learning, because I can get in my Prius and win the race because I took the time to understand the environment, the resources. I've worked with the subject matter experts. I've interviewed the leaders on which projects are really important to the organization. We've helped to prioritize them. Then we run them through a whole bunch of qualifiers. As Keith was saying, there is no deployment unless you understand how it's going to be deployed, ways in which the results are going to be operationalized. How are we going to measure the impact of the organization, not just the artificial model accuracy metrics? They're different. And until we do that and perform that work up front, and not just prepare the data, but prepare the environment, prepare the mind shift that's required to run from gut level decisioning to data driven, where these organizations will remain immature. And what we're finding is that these organizations and data scientists are still pursuing technical, tactical, methodological training. And it's the training that we're describing here to resolve the strategic blunders that these organizations are making that we see all the time. So I've capitalized on this response. I understand that, but it is, really what is close and dear to the modeling agency. It's what makes us unique. It's what we do to really enable organizations to ultimately not just do analytics for the sake of analytics, but start getting results that are impactful and actionable and operationable and adoptable. And that's when analytics is really going to advance for these organizations. So with that, I'll allow Lillian to put your thoughts a little bit more together. I'm sure you have them at hand, but let's start with Scott. And what would you say to the difference between stacking such a deep bench of PhDs and data scientists versus how immature organizations are in their analytic journey?
Well, I think it's a great question, Ricky. And Eric kind of stole my metaphor a little bit, but I'll build on a little bit and simplify. Basically, in this business, at the very high level, you've got a major branch, and to use the racing metaphor, you've got people who actually build the cars and engineer the cars and design the cars, and then you've got the race car drivers. The PhDs tend to be in the engineering side of the business, but thankfully and luckily, probably if I had to pull a number out of the air, 95% of the folks who are in the business are actually drivers. It doesn't require a PhD to be a good race car driver. You need to be able, the software is already written for what we do. You need to know how to operate that software for maximum performance, and you have a lot of metrics that the software produces that lets you know how well it's done. But that doesn't directly address your question. The best way that I know of to bridge that gap between PhDs and people who don't have PhDs, and by the way, I don't think you have to have a PhD, is results. I don't know, I hear that you did a course and you got some type of certificate. I don't know where you're at in terms of projects, but nothing speaks like success. Success is the great equalizer. So based upon some of the things that Keith said, what I would do at this point is I would look for two things. I'd look for a project that I could do and bring some positive bottom line type of impact to it, and I'd also look for a sponsor for that project. Now, usually, if you're trying to get started in analytics in a company, I'd also recommend that you do it on your own time. You don't want to interrupt the normal flow of your responsibilities. But if you can bring a couple of successes to the table, all barriers come down. You don't need a PhD. You get the attention of the right kind of people, and if you have one success, that brings other opportunities.
Terrific, Scott. Thanks so much. And welcome, Lillian. Glad to have you with us. Would you like to add to that one, or would you like me to introduce another question and start with you?
Yeah, actually, I really, what Scott was saying really resonated with me a lot, and is pretty much along the same lines as I was thinking. I wouldn't focus too much on the title. I would focus on getting your getting project experience under whatever, if you can find a position that is going to give you experience in the skills that you need, then and it pays reasonably well, then I would take that because there are a lot of companies that are asking for PhDs, but there are a lot of opportunities out there that, that they don't.
Lillian, I think we lost your audio for the moment.
Can you hear me?
Now you're back, yes.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't worry too much about the title. I would worry at this point. I would worry about getting your experience in, and yeah, that's about it.
Sure, yeah, and that's great advice, Lillian, especially these days. And God, I'm getting a heavy echo. That might be from your line. If you can do a self-mute, I'm not able to mute you from the panel. That might be, there we go. Thanks so much. Well, no, the echo's still there. I apologize for that. And it is gone now. Thanks so much. So yeah, I agree with titles, particularly these days when very few really understand what a data scientist is. And a lot of organizations don't know how to hire a data scientist. And I think, data science is such a broad field that either you're a generalist and you understand a little bit about all of the different areas that apply to data science. It's a huge tent. Or you're a specialist. And if you're a specialist, what is your specialty? And that's going to help hire. However, as much as I feel that there's more than enough qualified data scientists, again, with statistics and machine learning, there are very few who have the leadership traits and can serve as a translator of the analytic story that's really required for an organization to consume those results. That's what we're looking. I don't mean to make this into a pitch, but that's what we recognized in the industry. And we're trying to develop the data scientists who have, say, the business acumen that want to really stand out and mature into those translators, the ones that are really unique and rare and of highest value. And you're not really bringing value to your organization simply by coming up with accurate models or fast race cars or highly functional rockets. If you don't have that mission plan, if you don't know what you're bringing back on that mission and what it's to do for the organization, then what's it all for? And that's what most of these data scientists toil on, is, again, making the engine run faster, better. And that's why I say there's all this obsession about which modeling method. And yes, there's trade-offs between accuracy and explainability, and those are things you can pick up in your assessment. But at the end of the day, you've got to make sure that you understand how these are going to be applied in the organization. And I will say this, most feel that those kinds of strategic considerations, data scientists, they have a lot of pride in their technical prowess, but when it comes to strategic considerations, many of them see it as kind of strategic fluff, and there couldn't be anything more pragmatic. If those are not considered, we're not going to end up bringing value, and analytics just is going to die on the vine. So even though a lot of these questions seem so obvious, they appear to be trite, they're the ones that as consultants we see are continually overlooked, and they're the ones that end up being at the peril of an organization's benefit and competitive edge. So that's what we are trying to convey with organizations, both through training and consultative oversight, to help advance their overall analytic capability. And Greg, let me go on to the next question. This time, Lillian, we'll start with you. As an analyst at a mid-sized company, how can I hedge against a potential analytic reporting software change for myself and for users? Let me reread that one. As an analyst at a mid-sized company, how can I hedge against potential analytic reporting software change? So where the reporting, and Lillian, feel free, if you want to clarify the question, go ahead and verbalize it. We can send it back to Greg if you need. You can also feel free to pass, and we can go over to Scott and address it that way. So whatever you're comfortable with. How can I hedge against a potential analytic reporting software change? So you're wanting to hedge against, and feel free to bounce this question back to Greg, but it sounds like there's an issue coming up where you're looking at reporting the results of analytics. Somebody wants to change the software you're working with, and you want to stay with what you've got. Is that right, Greg? If you can clarify that a little bit further. And Lillian, if you have any initial ideas for Greg, go ahead and shoot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the question it would help to have a little more clarification, but my whole idea, just listening to what you've stated, is that just it's important to know your data sources, and where your data is coming from, and have alternative approaches than just using a point-and-click software. Because if see, a lot of this also will come down to security, and if you can get access to the data you need, if you change the systems, then sometimes they won't let you write scripts straight out of the system, like many times they won't. But at least if you know your data sources and can explain to them in advance before changing out the systems, the problems that this is going to cause, you might be able to at least persuade them to let you keep your system in place. That's all.
Great advice. Yeah, that's a good tip. Yeah, thanks, Lillian. Scott, anything to add?
Well, to build upon the excellent insights from Lillian, when I think about a software change, I think about two reasons why I might want to avoid a software change. The first one is familiarity, and the second one is functionality. We all like, when we learn a software package, we become familiar with what it can do, what it can't do, and we learn to become very skillful in terms of using that software to get tasks done. That's something that happens with all of us. We tend to get a software package that we like and we work in it, and we learn to be productive in it. That's separate from functionality. I think it would be fair to say that just about anybody in our industry is familiar with more than one software package, because as good as they are, there's sometimes functionality that's missing within software. So to the second point of functionality, you probably have a better case to build if you want to hedge against that software change because it doesn't offer the types of things that you need, or you lose functionality. I do my investigation of that. It may not work the same way that you're accustomed to doing it in your current environment, but do your investigation and see if it does do what you need. If it does do what you need, you don't have a case. But if there's functionality that you're missing, you do have a case, and bring that to your superiors.
Fantastic advice from both. One small piece that I'd add, Greg, is you're talking about hedging against. One thing that I emphasize with organizations and analytics is to have that translator. So perhaps to perform like a translator and go back to whoever might be proposing a change of the reporting software and find out what's the motivation. And there may be ways to resolve, with the software that you're currently using. Again, as Scott had said, having that familiarity. You might find out, as Lillian had said, there are security concerns. Maybe they're fully legitimate and they can't be addressed by the current software. You have an appreciation for the motivations around that change, how to address them. Maybe you can keep your software, but augment it with another package, and everybody gets to resolve all issues, and everyone's happy. So, again, more of that communication, and that's where we emphasize, the soft skills to be able to look at the best overall design for what needs to be achieved within the organization. And that's not just with reporting, but where do we find the value? What's most important to the organization? And most times when we go into an organization, they'll have, say, 2 or 3 ideas of projects. And I don't always advise just jumping in on a pilot on those. And it's not that easy to sell a more comprehensive assessment. But if you don't engage in that broader assessment, to take those 2 or 3 ideas and populate it into about 18 to 20, and you can get up to that 18 or 20 simply by educating leadership a little bit on the kinds of questions they can be asking of analytics. Then, when we start putting those 18 to 20 through the qualifiers that I've spoken about, all the different considerations that you need to look at in order to arrive at value-focused results, you'll see that most of these projects are going to fall to the wayside. There's different reasons why they're not going to be deployable or consumable or adoptable or measurable or a host of other considerations that we have within that framework that we presented. So that's where I also recommend looking at at that framework. So let's go on with our last question. I know we're going over a few minutes, but it's another follow-up question. And thanks again, Greg, for your great question. That's great. If you have a follow-up, just let us know. Ricky has A related question, Scott, you touched on this. Ricky asked, and I love this one, does a good data scientist need advanced programming capabilities like Java, R, Python, those kinds of things? Of course, I have my diatribe queued up here, right? But I'm going to step on my own foot here and remain quiet and not hog the mic. Does a good data scientist need advanced programming capabilities? Scott, go ahead, and then Lillian will come over to you. And Scott, you may be muted.
How's that?
There we go.
Okay, super. I was muted. I muted myself. I don't do that often, by the way. Okay, so the answer is a qualified no. You don't need advanced, programming kind of capabilities, but it helps. One of the dirty little secrets in our business is when you look from the outside in, you think the business is about these magical algorithms that you just dump data into, it churns and whirs and spits out the correct answer on the other end. Well, that couldn't be farther from the truth. If you really want to know what we spend most of our time on, it's on everything that happens before we do actually put data into an algorithm. The algorithm and working with it itself is a smaller part of the entire cycle. And more specifically, what I'm talking about is data prep. Now, there are systems that have drop-down boxes, and you can do a lot of your data prep using drop-down boxes, but generally it helps to know how to code or be working with a software environment that has its own syntax language that's integrated within it, so that you can do your data prep and do all your data transformations and select samples and create transformations, all these types of things. Now, that's within the system itself, and it's related to a predictive analytics project. Separate from that, you have other languages like Java and C++. Those are not so important unless, and this is where the qualification comes in, unless you're working in a systems environment and you are directly responsible for systemizing the work that you do in predictive analytics. A lot of the predictive analytics or modeling tasks that we do are one-offs. We'll create a model and then we'll put that model into production. So that's the dividing line between systems and predictive analytics. If you're part of the production environment, and then yeah, it may be needed or may be beneficial to have Java or C++ coding skills, but in general, that's the exception to the rule rather than the rule itself.
Great considerations, thanks, Scott. Especially with coding coming in more with kind of the IT functions that surround the actual analytics. When it comes to operationalizing or even, coding some of the ETL, how the data is going to be acquired and drawn and accumulated, that's where I see coding can be helpful there. But coding for the actual analytics, I don't know so much about that. What have you seen, Lillian? How much coding, as a seasoned analytic consultant and having done a lot of implementation, how much do you see yourself relying on coding or programming when it comes to the actual analytics?
Well, okay, so I thought the question was about data science and not analytics, but
good
okay,
point.
so
You're absolutely right. It is a broader question. Does a good data scientist need advanced programming capabilities like Java and the rest? You're absolutely right. I targeted it, and it was a broader perspective. You're right.
Okay, so I think that, and also the question was saying advanced coding. And so that kind of throws me off a little because I would say that the coding that's required for data science is really not, in general, not that complicated, especially in Python. It's been made with scikit-learn and in the other packages, it's been really simplified. I think that the coding part of data science is the easier component. And I hear a lot of people saying, oh, that they're going to build applications, analytical applications, that'll just take away the coding requirement altogether. And I don't have, maybe, maybe not. But to me, well, no, actually, I don't think that's possible. But to me, the thing about it is, even if you have an analytics application that you can just point and click and run models and get results, you have to understand what the results mean, which means you have to have an understanding of the math and statistics that go, that go into it and go into interpreting the results. And so it's like the coding part of it really, I think people just get intimidated when they think of coding. But it's actually not. The more complex part is understanding what's happening. And I think that's the most important area to spend your time when you're studying.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, and I appreciate it. And Ricky's coming back saying, thanks, Lily, great insight. Yeah, and I would say that there's so much sophisticated software that can help to build more than adequate models, and that's the big point. When you're developing an analytic process, you just need a more than adequate model, not an optimized one. And when you go through to develop the process of finding how that model is going to be applied and measured and valued and adopted, we don't really need to be doing much coding until it's ready to be operationalized, and that may not be the analytic practitioner's role. There may be others under the data science tent that can help to kind of codify the results of that into a process that, we're moving from building a process model into more of an analytic factory. And at that point, there may be some coding. But when it comes to the actual analytics, I think modern software allows, for the development of well more than adequate models to be developed and even deployed to some extent without having to rely on heavy math and coding. So great questions. And, for a small group, we really came up with not only a good number of very valid questions, but those that really align, I think, with some of the uniqueness that we can bring with our perspectives to the to analytic development. Lillian or Scott, I'm going to wrap up. I think there still may be one of you unmuted because I'm still getting some heavy echo. But at 40 minutes past the hour, we better draw this event to a close, and I'd certainly like to thank our attendees today for your sustained interest and your active participation, as well as Scott and Keith for your great presentation segments and the highly informative Q&A contributions, with special thanks to Lillian. We'll follow up with an email shortly with some resources that will hopefully be useful to you. From there, we hope that you'll consider joining us at a public classroom or online live training event soon. Make sure to go to the website and check out the schedule and details for our upcoming productions in Seattle in July, the live online experiential courses in August, in Washington, D.C. in October. On behalf of myself, Scott, Keith, and Lillian, thank you again for attending Predictive Analytics Failure to Launch. Have a very pleasant afternoon and evening, and this brings the webinar broadcast to a close.